Okay, can everybody hear me? Sweet. Okay, we're going to get started. We'll start with some quick introductions. So I am Swenson. I am an assistant collections manager downstairs in Earth Sciences who works on the Madagascar project.
My name is Rudolph Hummel. I am a research assistant here, and I also work a lot on the Madagascar project.
And my name is Lora Bird. I own a tattoo shop in Wheat Ridge called Nest Art Collective, and I'm a resident artist there.
Yeah, pretty cool. All right, you want to hit it? All right, to start off, I'm going to give a little bit of background about the Madagascar project for folks who aren't as familiar with it. The reason we have a bunch of specimens from Madagascar here at the museum is because Dave Krause, our senior curator, has spent over 30 years, with many other researchers, of course, collecting specimens from the late Cretaceous of Madagascar. So it's over 30 years of fieldwork and collections. So we have tens of thousands of specimens downstairs. And amongst those specimens, we have over 20 new species across taxa. So the Madagascar collection includes birds, lizards, snakes, fish, dinosaurs, mammals, basically everything you could think of. And throughout the entire time that the project has been going on, it's been a really collaborative project. So Dave has always worked with researchers around the world, but also Madagascan researchers, Madagascan fieldworkers, students, professors, including folks like Bakuli, who's in this picture here, who many of you may have met. Shout out to Bakuli. But she was here for about a year learning prep techniques and collections techniques. And the reason that I'm part of this project is because half of the collection is going to be going back to Madagascar to live at the University of Antananarivo, and that requires a lot of organization on our part. It involves cataloging things, getting them onto online databases where they're more accessible. It involves creating beautiful jackets and foam homes for them, and it also involves organizing our cast and mold collection, which is what Rudolph has been working on.
So in paleontology, it's really important to have replicas of fossils for a variety of reasons. We can send those replicas to other researchers so we can study the same things from different places. We can use them for education. It's a lot better to give a young kid a plastic fossil rather than a real fossil in case they drop it. And then other, like putting things on exhibit, or in our case, it's really important for us to have replicas because a lot of this material is going to stay here in Denver and a lot of it is going back to Madagascar. We would love to keep some replicas of some of what's going back to Madagascar, and obviously it's very important for us to send them replicas of anything they'd like that's going to stay here. So there's a couple ways that we can make replicas in paleontology. These days we do a lot of 3D printing and scanning and that sort of thing. But in the past, the most common method was molding and casting. So here we have an original snake vertebra fossil. We would then make a silicone mold of that and then use that silicone mold to make a plastic cast or plaster or whatever else other material that we might want to make it out of. So obviously the molds are a really important part of that process. We have over 700 molds here, which we can still use to produce more casts. And just like any collection of objects that's that large, we need to really, really carefully organize those objects and label them so that we don't lose information associated with them. So for example, when I started organizing these, they were not really organized much at all. They were kind of mixed with different types of animals in with one another, different parts of the body. And if we didn't have a way to label them or associate the information, the mold with the original specimen, we could basically lose track of what mold went to which fossil and then not be able to find what we needed and not really be able to use these things. So there's a really critical need to be able to label them. And that is where the problem comes in because the silicone that these are made of is very, very oily. Marker pigment does not stick to it. If you write on them with Sharpie, it doesn't matter if you wait 3 seconds for the ink to dry or 3 years. It will still wipe off if you slightly brush it with your fingers. So Sharpie doesn't really work. There have been other things that have been done in the past. One popular one is to stamp the label in as the silicone is still curing. So that can work really well. We can get really clean, legible stamped labels, but there are a few issues with it. One of them is that sometimes the stamped labels are still hard to read. We know what this says, but it took a few seconds to figure it out. If any of you know what this says, please let us know afterward because we still don't know what fossil this mold belongs to. In this case, the silicone that was used was just like, there's no contrast for the eye to catch on to tell what the stamp says. So stamping these is basically the way we were able to get as far as we were with organization. It was really important, it was really helpful, but there are a variety of issues with it. One of them is just the legibility, but one of them is also the fact that a lot of these molds were made before the specimens they're based on were cataloged. So in order to label them, we used the field number, which is assigned when you first find something in the field, rather than the catalog number, which is the number it gets when it's accessioned into the collections here. So what that meant was that half of these molds were labeled with one type of number system, and half of them were labeled with a completely different numbering system. And you can't change that once the mold is made if you're using the stamped labels, because you can't stamp a new label on once the silicone has cured. So the stamped labels are really helpful. They helped us get as far as we had gotten, but they weren't like an all-encompassing solution. So we started to look into other ideas. We looked at Silicode, which is a sticker that's specifically designed to stick to silicone. And we were pretty impressed with how well it stuck to silicone, but you need to be able to flex a mold in order to get the cast out. And every time you do that, if you've got a solid sticker, the edge will separate from the silicone. So the stickers weren't perfect. Basically, after flexing the molds a few times, the sticker would come off and wouldn't readhere. We also looked at vinyl polysiloxane, which is a dental material. There was a poster at a paleontology conference a few years ago that suggested using this to label molds. And as you can see, they're using a dental syringe here to squeeze it out and write with it. And they're able to flex that very nicely. They were basically unable to remove it once it went on. So that seemed like a good idea. But they also reported that it was really difficult to write small or legibly. So that's obviously an issue. A lot of our molds are like, some of them are as small as coin-sized. So this would not have been a viable method for those. And the real kicker with both Silicode and the vinyl polysiloxane is this. Basically, both of those methods, the Silicode stickers, cost over $1 per sticker because they need to be heat transfer printed. We don't have a heat transfer printer here. The company would have had to print them for us, which means if they sent the printed ones to us and there was something wrong, we'd have to get another, we'd have to fix it and send it off to them again and wait for them to send the next one. So correcting incorrect labels becomes this huge, complicated chore. And we're looking at more than $1 per mold. Like I said, we have like 700 Madagascar molds. That becomes very expensive very quick. And same with the vinyl polysiloxane. Assuming that each of those labels would require maybe 2 liters of that material, it would also cost more than $1 per label. So both of these were potentially viable solutions, but we really wanted to see if we could come up with something a little less expensive. And that is when Sierra suggested using tattoo equipment. So I didn't know this, but she pointed out that tattoo artists actually practice on a silicone fake skin, which is really similar to the material that we needed to label. And then we looked into it a little bit more, and it turns out that since like the 80s, authors have recommended like using a scalpel to cut numbers into the silicone and then rubbing ink into them. So basically tattooing. One more recent author had even kind of suggested doing it with a needle, like stick and poke style. So we tested that, and it seemed promising. So at that point, we were like, okay, well, how expensive would it be for us to get a little tattoo machine? Not very expensive, it turns out. So, I mean, yeah, this graph barely requires any interpretation, but basically where these would require more than $1 per label and in excess of like $600 for just 500 labels, we were able to get all of the tattoo equipment for under $60, including shipping. And I just
realized you might put me out of a job.
I'll let Sierra talk about that equipment next.
Oh, right, the clicker. Okay, so like Rudolph said, all of this that you're seeing up here costs only $51.51, and it's all from Amazon. So honestly, a little bit dangerous to be putting that out there for people to just grab whenever they feel like it. But this kit that's up here is basically exactly what we got, except our pen is red instead of purple. But it's a pen, and then it comes with kind of the voltage box and a pedal for foot pedal, so it's not wireless. And it also comes with some vet tape that's to wrap around the outside of the pen. It's kind of like an ergonomic thing. It came with gloves, came with some of that fake skin stuff that Rudolph was talking about to practice on, a bunch of different colors of ink, ink caps for you to put the ink in while you're working, and some transfer paper if you wanted to do like stencils or something. So a lot of this we didn't actually use, but we did use the pen and the ink caps, and we used some of the needles as well. And we bought our own ink. So instead of using the tattoo ink, we decided to use archival ink and see if it would tattoo similarly. And as it turns out, it works freaking great. So it was completely successful. This is our first kind of little tattoo tester. Natalie and the prep lab were kind enough to give us some scraps that we could play with, and play we did. So now we have a bunch of these that we've tattooed, or at least at this point in time. So we practiced a bunch. We kind of got a sense of how deep we needed to go, what kind of voltage we needed to use, which needles worked the best out of the kit that we got. And then we moved on to actually tattooing the real molds that you see up here. And here's some more examples really quick. So you can see what we're tattooing on them is basically, let's see, laser pointer. The first number here, the EPC number, that is the catalog number that these molds are getting from the museum. And then the UA numbers are the catalog number of the specimen that the mold is of. And then the final number, the MAD number, is the MAD for Madagascar. And that's the field number that the specimen was given when it was first picked up. And we're also able to add little details too, like these diamonds represent that the specimen in the mold is a holotype. And some of the molds have multiples, so we're able to add like number 45, for example, on this one. Boop. So at this point in time, we're having a really good time. We've tattooed probably like a few dozen of these. It's going really well. And then we see on Instagram an ad for a really cool Friday the 13th flash event. And for folks who don't have a bunch of tattoos and don't really know what that is, on Friday the 13th, lots of tattoo studios will host flash events, which is where each of their artists will draw up a set number of designs, and then they'll basically marathon tattoo all day long, only those designs. And we saw this ad on Instagram for an event at Nest Art Collective in partnership with the DMNS. And we were like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is exactly what we've been working on. So we reached out to Zach and Kira. Huge shout out to Zach and Kira and EMP, who were kind enough to let us table with them at this event. So Zach and Kira on one end of the table had a microscope out so that folks could look at their new tattoos under the microscope. Pretty cool. And then on the other end of the table, it was Rudolph and I with our Madagascar paleo project. We brought some casts, we brought a bunch of molds. We probably tattooed over 100 molds at this event because we were there all day long just tattooing and talking to folks. And I think the coolest thing to come out of this was that it kept channels of communication open between us and Zach and Lora that resulted in the beautiful relationship that we have now. So we started talking to Zach and Lora about, maybe we could bring some folks from Nest here to the museum, kind of a thank you, show them around, and have them talk to us about technique and equipment and all these kinds of things, maybe improve our project a little bit. And that is exactly what we did next. So I'll let Lora talk a little bit about what that experience was like.
I mean, this is what it was like. So fun, so exciting. I'm obviously very interested in science, and I never really considered tattooing to be very scientific. So this was such a cool opportunity. So thanks to Zach for putting that together. I remember the call, this is gonna be so cool. And it was. And then actually this middle photo, getting my group of artists to all look in the same direction and be interested in something like this is actually an extremely impressive feat. So all of them were super excited. We're super honored to be able to see this collection. It just feels like, it's like a dream almost. I told them it was an opportunity and one of them cried. So we were really excited. And then being able to just kind of define and refine the technique that they were using. I'm not saying that their labels are bad. They did a really, really good job, actually. But just being able to kind of show them some tips and tricks and maybe introduce some new equipment that might be a little bit easier to use is kind of where we ended up going with this project. Yeah, so I came in and used their pen from Amazon, and respectfully, it's not that great. And if you guys are planning on doing that, ask me about biohazards, so just don't. But so I brought in my machine, which is wireless, and it's a little bit more ergonomic, and it's a lot more powerful and a lot easier and more consistent to use. So this is something that obviously is a lot more expensive than $50, but I think is just a better option overall. And we ended up kind of setting up like a schedule of the artists coming in, tattooing the molds, learning from them like what all needs to be tattooed, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll bring our own equipment, which includes needles. The needles that come from Amazon, also respectfully, are not that great. And I kind of wanted to show them the difference between all of the different needles that we use. The RL you see here stands for round liner. There are obviously different kinds that we use for actual art on skin. But these are the ones that will be relevant to scientists going forward with this method. But 7RL, you can see, has 7 points. 5RL has 5. This is kind of a traditional type needle, and you can see there's more space in between the actual pins here. If we go down to bug pin, that literally just means they take the pins and squish them all together, which personally I think makes a more consistent and easier to use line. I almost exclusively use bug pins on humans as well. So it just depends on what you're going for. This to me is more for like shading. You can kind of see like this is so much thicker. It's a little hard to tell. This one at the bottom, the bug pin 3RL, is actually, in real life, the mold is like very small. It's like super whittle. So this one is a little bit bigger, so you need that thicker line to be able to see. But in my opinion, the bug pins just look cleaner, more consistent, and easier.
So now that we have all of this brand new information, what are we going to do with it? Well, we still have about 400 molds that need labels for this project. Rudolph, the kind of lead on this project, is only going to be here through the rest of April. So our solution is to use these very eager experts in tattooing at NES to help us work through the rest of these molds. So they'll be coming in as kind of visiting researcher experts to assist us in finishing this up. And you can see this is one example of a mold that Rudolph and I were both absolutely terrified to try to label because it's so tiny. And although Lora...
I was terrified too. I lost
Yeah.
sleep about it.
But you did an amazing job. Certainly, I think better than Rudolph and I could have done. So we're going to have some really beautiful molds by the end of this.
Yeah, so that's the bug pin 3, in case you're wondering.
So going forward with this, beyond just our collection of molds that we're trying to label and organize, this seems like a really viable method to do something that museums have been struggling to do for decades. There's been a lot of literature offering different methods to label silicone molds, and none of it has really worked that well. And this is cheap. It works really well. And even though it would have been nice if this was discovered 20 years ago before 3D printing and scanning became the main way that we make replicas, a lot of museums do still have collections of molds that see use. And at a lot of smaller institutions, they don't have 3D printing and scanning opportunities. So we would love to share this method with as many people as possible. We're hoping to submit abstracts to the Geological Society of America and the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. And we are also working on a publication. We're working on putting together a scientific paper that documents this process and also contains a set of recommendations for other people who want to try it out.
As we were talking about this in the lab, I kind of got the ball rolling in my head that maybe it would be kind of cool to offer my, I guess, expertise. Whatever. Thank you. To offer my insight as kind of like a, just something that I could share with other institutions as well. I'm more than happy to kind of like bridge that gap between science and art and maybe introduce people to artists in their area who are super interested in doing this kind of thing. I am lucky to have a really wide web on Instagram of people that are safe tattooers and interested in science and very cool people. Pretty much in every city in America at this point, or major city at least. I also thought about building a rentable kit that could be rented out to these institutions if the nice machine is cost prohibitive. Maybe we have one that I have like donated or put together and they can rent it for a nominal fee and then send it back when they're done with my information. Oh, I can't get it to charge. I don't know what to do. What do I do with this needle? My information is right there for them to ask questions to. And then maybe I can also hook them up with an artist that could come and show them like we did here. So that was kind of my idea. I'm hoping that will be possible. I think it would be really cool. So.
Sweet. Okay, so we've sort of arrived close to the end of this talk, but really quick before we finished up, we wanted to kind of give a shout out to the Ankesi Fund. So Dave started the Ankesi Fund, I think in 1998, to help the children of Madagascar that he had cultivated relationships with during his field work. And so the kinds of things that they do are funding teachers, building schools, they help out with healthcare and hygiene costs, like building wells and things like that, as well as sustainability initiatives. And one of the really cool things about the Ankesi Fund is that all of that money that you send, that you donate, is truly going only to pay salaries, pay for these innovations, and pay for the folks who are running the organization, and that's it. So it's really direct. And we have up here a QR code, and they'll be on the next slide too, so don't worry, but a QR code to learn more, so it takes you to ankesifund.org, and also a QR code straight to donation if you're interested. So thank you very much, and we'll take some questions now.
Is this on?
Stick around too if you're interested in seeing any of our labels. Once we're done with questions, we'll turn the lights on, and we have a cart full of some of our equipment and examples of different needle types and molds and stuff up here.
This is my audience nerd test. Raise your hand if you thought that was pretty darn cool. Questions?
That was close, Paula. I was curious at how long the ink will last in the molds or in like the fake skin. Like, what is the archival longitude of this?
Yeah, so we had no idea. It was kind of difficult to figure out what the archival capability of the regular tattoo ink was. So we went ahead and just bought archival ink for like artwork and museum stuff. What we bought was not light fast, but also these are being stored in dark cabinets. And molds don't actually have an unlimited shelf life. So at this point, I expect that the labels will outlast the molds themselves. But if they don't, if they're stored in light and the ink fades over time, I'm guessing you could just put a little dot of ink on the label, rub it back into the cuts, and then dab off the extra and probably revitalize the label that way.
Also, regular tattoo ink, I've seen it last up to 15 years in silicone. Just that's like about when we started tattooing silicone as practice, just so if you're wondering.
Thank you. That was really exciting and not exactly what I was expecting. So my question is, you have a significant amount of specimens left to label, and this seems like something that would be so cool to see in action. Do you have any plans to share more about this really interdisciplinary creative story about the merging of science and art, which may actually just be one thing, but I was just curious, like, is there a way people can see this? Are you going to record some of it? This group is excited about it, but I think many, many people would be as well.
Yeah.
Let's do a time lapse.
That would be, yeah.
So we definitely have filmed some social media about it so far, but not a ton. We would like to do more. And we have had some brief talks about doing something out on the floor of the museum or some other kind of demonstration, but it's still early days. So we're very, very interested in getting it out to more people and would like to see that happen.
You best believe that once that paper is published or whatever we're waiting for, it's going to be all over my Instagram. So I'm super excited.
We have filmed like a minute-long short where we talk about the process in very short terms, and you can watch the tattooing happening, and that will be posted eventually. So you can stay tuned for that.
I have a question. Okay, so you had mentioned that you had seen some of this in literature, but I mean, how is it not, I guess what I'm trying to say is, are we one of the first institutions that's actively doing it now, or are some of the colleagues and collaborators?
I don't think anyone thought to do this earlier, which is interesting because, people had been doing kind of a stick and poke method, but I found no documentation and have never heard of people using commercial tattoo equipment. When Sierra suggested that, it blew my mind. And now I'm kind of surprised that nobody thought of it sooner. And maybe someone did, and we just don't know about it, but
Well, and this is maybe something that I meant to mention in the slide, but I got distracted because I'm nervous. Another benefit to having like an artist bridge in this project is that I have access to supplies that the general public does not have access to. Like, again, the Amazon machine is not that good, but I also have access to like the needles and the ink caps and like stuff that's like, if you go on Amazon and look, it's like, it can be really overwhelming. You don't know what's right, you don't know what's wrong. So I can just kind of like point that arrow in the right direction, and you know it's going to be safe and consistent. So right now, like if you tried to buy tattoo needles, you probably wouldn't be able to, for example. So
Are the sort of cheap online kits, are those sort of a new phenomenon?
yeah, I would say probably in the last like 5 to 7 years,
Okay.
it's kind of become a thing. I think everybody, I don't want to be rude. Everybody learns differently. You don't have to have an apprenticeship, but it is, in my opinion, extremely unsafe. If we're talking from like a biohazard standpoint on people, this machine is not, it will never be able to be cleaned properly. The reason that it's like cool to use it on this is because we're using the same needles on the same silicone that doesn't have blood inside of it. If that was used on a person, it would absolutely cause infections, like big bad staph infections. So that's my issue with it. And like in the tattoo kit, you notice it didn't come with any wraps for the machine, or extra pairs of gloves, or any type of biohazard training.
One pair of gloves.
One pair of gloves. It's all you need.
So yeah, that probably is part of the answer. If this equipment was not available at this price, or perhaps even at all until recently.
Right. Well, and you noted earlier, like, oh, I wish it had been here 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we didn't have pen machines. This is,
Oh, okay.
I learned on a coil 6 years ago. A coil being like the big old ones that like, they're really loud. I don't know if you know about them. But yeah, so pen machines are honestly a pretty new invention, and they're changing my industry, and now this one too.
I have two things. One, if you want to expand a little bit on your areas of tattooing museum things, we have some very interesting materials in the education collections, especially like health science, which might have slightly different than RTV, but still that greasy rubber stuff. So if you want to add to your database for any paper, just let me know and we can arrange that. Second
Honestly,
thing.
sign me up, yeah.
Second thing, if this museum were able to get its act together and get like a really good tattoo for all its staff people, could we get a discount?
How many of the back rooms can I see?
All of them.
All of them. Okay. Let's work it out. Let's work it out.
Spider, I'm just saying that. Other questions?
We got one in the
Oh,
front.
yep.
If you want to follow all my artists while she's walking, it's Nest Art Collective on Instagram. You can see we have 13 artists to choose from. And we have a question.
This is not a question, this is a comment. I want to say, Laura, you are an expert in your own field, and you work with people every day and keep them safe and healthy while making sure that they live happy, fulfilling lives. And your expertise has contributed drastically and amazingly to this project. And so, like, don't talk down about yourself. Don't feel bad about yourself. Like, you are an expert in your field. Yeah. You are celebrated and loved here.
Okay, I'm going to cry on stage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Come see zoology. We love you.
Other question? Come over there. Ready?
This is not my idea. I have to second what Annie just said. DMNS flash sheets, Swen?
I mean, let's work it out. I really want to talk to you about the adult night situation, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
Is
Let's do
Austin
it.
here? No, he's not.
he never is. I've still never met him.
You met him. You just have like, I gotta get you a phone number. It's fine.
We'll get there. We'll get there. It's time.
Other questions? All right, let's thank our speakers. Oh, that was great.